a playlist original.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host Gaius and Jackson, episode 94.
No.
94. Also, another anniversary episode.
Yes.
We keep bringing it. I mean, we told you that there were a lot coming, and
We weren't lying.
and we weren't lying, and we know that we can't get to all of them, but we are trying to do as many of them as we can. Either ones that I really think will be fun, or Jackson thinks will really be fun, or
We got a healthy list
Uh,
from them. There's lots more coming too.
yeah. But for this one's pretty cool because the last anniversary episode was for X2 X-Men United, and we mentioned during that kind of talk on that movie, it was cool to kind of go back to a time before these movies were kind of set up like universes, and it was just focused on one thing, and that was the immediate plot in the movie. And it was a kind of forgotten time, given the fact that what we have now is a lot of universe building with comic book movies. But with this 15th anniversary, we are discussing kind of like the start of said universe building for Marvel, and that's because we are discussing the 15th anniversary of Iron Man, which was released on May 2nd, 2008. Not only is this 15th anniversary of that film, but the MCU as a whole. This is the MCU created as we know it, starting from this little project that I don't think anyone really expected to be as huge as it was and as successful and critically well accepted. A lot of people consider this one of the best comic book movies ever made. Probably one of
Definitely
the
origin story wise.
origin for sure, yeah. And I rewatched it yesterday. It was my first watch of it since 2019. So I did like an MCU rewatch up to that point to prepare for Avengers Endgame. So it's been a few years since I watched it, and honestly, it was still just as fun as I remembered it. It's a like you said, a really good, solid. Because sometimes origin stories, it can get bogged down in like how the person gets their powers or how they become the hero that we all kind of know them as. But this one has a lot of fun with the origin story, I think, and like you're kind of along the ride with Tony Stark as he goes from being a pretty self-centered human being to someone with heart and compassion that wants to like do something, wants to do the right thing and not work for a company that would, or be the namesake of a company that would be hurting anyone. Basically, he discovers something far greater than himself, and that is simple tale, but is a very cool one to have in a comic book superhero movie because you kind of, I think, identify with heroes like that. They begin one way and then something shapes and changes them, and that's who and that's how they become the heroes that we all kind of know them as. I don't know, man. I saw this on opening night when it came out. I was not too familiar with Iron Man as a character though. I didn't read Iron Man comic book, so I was pretty I was not fresh. I mean, I was fresh when it came to this.
Many people were not.
Yeah. And I was like, all right. I mean, I think there was a cartoon at one point. I remember in cartoon form. I knew what he looked like. Knew real name Tony Stark and all that, but I didn't know much about the character at all. So like, sometimes it's cool going to these comic book movies where you don't have any attachment to the character or the brand or anything like that going in. So I got to go into this completely unencumbered, but like with expectations,
Right.
And it was I couldn't even gauge before the movie came out what the awareness was for the movie, like if people were hyped for it or excited for it. I do remember that first trailer got a pretty good response when it came out, but I couldn't really tell like if this was going to be huge or not. And I remember that opening night, it was completely sold out. So I was like, all right, I guess this is the thing that people really want to see. And it felt like a genuine, real good like crowd pleaser. Like everyone really enjoyed it. I remember this was a big, I mean, he has already started a bit of a comeback, but this was the huge turning point comeback for Robert Downey Jr. I mean, Hollywood legend knows he had a lot of problems
Definitely.
with drugs back in the day, and it was a real gamble casting him in this role. Jon Favreau really fought to have him be in it. Oddly enough, Terrence Howard was paid more than Robert Downey Jr. to be in this movie. More on him later.
Yeah, exactly. Planting some seeds there.
But you could tell in that theater that everyone was just really responding to what Robert Downey Jr. was doing, though. Like he's a good actor, like no doubt. For better or worse, now he's so attached to this role. Like it's hard for me to sometimes separate Robert Downey Jr. from who Tony Stark is. I mean, he has that kind of snark too in his real life, it seems.
Yeah.
Where does Robert and Tony begin? Like it's hard to kind of figure that out sometimes.
Which is something you really want if you're going to convincingly play a character with a personality and an ego this big. I think
Right.
that is definitely a benefit to how he approaches this character. And now, in hindsight, with the 15 years that we've had since this movie debuted, we can now say, and I'm sure we agree, this is a gamble that unequivocally paid off, because this has launched, I don't know about a full resurrection. You'd have some more insight into his career than I would, but definitely brought Robert Downey Jr. back to the forefront of like massive, big blockbuster movie making.
Yeah, so before this, he was in Zodiac. He had already kind of cleaned himself up, and he was, good to go.
It's funny in that movie he plays someone struggling with addiction issues.
Yeah. But that wasn't like a big blockbuster movie. I mean, it's David Fincher.
Right.
By the way, guys, we did an anniversary episode for that last year, and I love Zodiac. I'm not dissing it as a movie. I'm just saying that it's not. He wasn't starring in movies like this, like Iron Man. I mean, he was still. It was a huge gamble because there's a lot to ensure an actor like when you're making a movie, and when you're someone like him who had like a problematic past with drugs and all that stuff, the insurance on that on someone like that is pretty high. So like a studio doesn't necessarily want to put that kind of money into someone and have it backfire on them, especially when they're trying to be like, all right, well, we're trying to kick something off here, like with this property. Is he going to be the right person to spearhead this? And thankfully, he was fully committed from the moment they went go, and he really wanted it. Jon Favreau really wanted him. I'm glad that he fought for him and got him to be in it, because he is the main attraction here, and he's like one of the main reasons why the movie works as well as it does. And it's not a one-note performance too. I would say like there is a lot of snark and humor, but then he has some really kind of serious moments that he plays up really well too. He has really good chemistry with Gwyneth Paltrow. They have this kind of like, it almost feels like a throwback to like flirtation. Like it's kind of like, it's not like a full-on romance. It's more the flirting at play that kind of makes their like interplay really interesting. So he has like a good rapport with her. And then, you got people like Jeff Bridges in this, who is also quite good. I was amazed to find out that his character was like edited down a lot.
Oh, okay.
To showcase more of Robert Downey Jr. And I guess you can kind of tell when you watch the movie a little bit if you know that, because he does kind of pop in and out. But overall, yeah, it's just like, this is just really good casting, really good writing, really good direction from Jon Favreau. It's crazy because in the grand scheme of things for comic book movies, it feels like there's not like a ton of action sequences in it. There are some like decent ones, but there aren't like, it's not littered with them. And it's kind of like, I feel like the narrative and the story and the performances kind of take precedent over the spectacle a bit. And I think that makes it a little bit more interesting than your typical comic book movie fare.
Agree with you.
But yeah, after that opening night, man, I remember telling everyone that would listen, like, this movie was like truly, truly good, and you could just feel it in the crowd that everyone really enjoyed it and really liked it. And it's crazy, like we said, it starts the MCU. Of course, in June we got the Incredible Hulk. We got that a month after Iron Man, and it was like, well, that wasn't as good as Iron Man. And then also crazy, even though this is DC, we have these two game-changing comic book movies that came out in the same year. You have Iron Man in May, and then by the time you get to July, you have The Dark Knight. And like two really good counterpoints of like how you can make a really good comic book movie adaptation.
Yes.
And what a year for that subgenre, I guess. Yeah. What was you seen it before? Like you're rewatch this or?
Yeah, I had seen it again. So I'm 10 years old when this movie comes out. Sure, every kid that age would have seen, like, as far as I can go back and remember, like, Tony Stark, Iron Man was like synonymous with like youth, definitely in terms of like superhero movies. Like, I don't really remember a time much before him, even though there very much was. It's just like once he burst on the scene, everyone knew who Iron Man was. And I knew that I had seen it, but I don't think I would have seen it until very shortly after release. So it'd been a long time since I'd seen Iron Man. And I was actually, truthfully, I was excited to that we had scheduled this movie to cover as an anniversary because I was excited to get back to the movie that started it all in terms of the MCU. I've made no secret as like my true feelings as to how this universe has come to be where it is now, and to go back to where it all started, to a very simpler time before things were as bloated as they are. It was honestly like quite a nice experience to be back, and I quite enjoyed this watch more than I maybe anticipated. There was some, there were some flaws, but honestly, I was for the most part able to put those aside and just enjoy the movie for what it was. As you said, a great origin story. Sucks that it had to come out in the year that unequivocally one of, if not the best comic book movie ever came out, and but it had the advantage that it came out right
At least
before.
there's some space. Yeah, at least there's
exactly.
between them. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, being there opening night, you would know a little bit more than me. Did you get the sense? Did people know that this was the beginning of what was going to become a broader universe, or was that not really until the credit scene at the end of Incredible Hulk that people really started to think, "Oh, these are going to be linked"?
It was definitely the Incredible Hulk that
is that right? Okay,
kind of solidified. I remember, at least for me and all my friends, it was like one of those. We thought we were just watching like a standalone movie. It was nothing.
Okay.
It didn't really feel like it was going to be building to this greater kind of cinematic universe.
And rewatching it, I didn't see anything in there. No threads
right
towards anything else.
Actually, that made it refreshing to watch too. That was like one of the things I gathered from rewatching it again. It was, even though this is like planting the seeds, like it was also unencumbered without having to like feel like it was needing to. You get little sprinkles in there, like with Coulson, right, talking about Shield and all that stuff.
He's like the only part
that's the only thing that makes you all right. This is something maybe when you're watching it now in hindsight, but watching it then in theaters, I wasn't like, I thought maybe they'd just be like talk, because we knew what he was referencing Shield, but I was like, I thought it was like a little like cool little like more movie Easter egg thing rather than like, oh, this could be something else down the line. But yeah, no, we did not know. Wasn't until a month later when we saw the Incredible Hulk, and I was like, oh, they're like
pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the only. Okay, we'll talk about that movie when that comes up. But that was one of the cool things about it was like, all right, this is building to like they're doing something bigger, and like in those beginning stages, that was exciting to see how we building up to the Avengers. And for better or worse, I think that did hurt some of their projects. Like, I think it hurt Iron Man 2 in particular. Like, because we got to throw in Scarlett Johansson, we got to throw in more Nick Fury. Like, even Jon Favreau was like, directing that movie compared to directing this first one was a much different experience, because he was like,
more to juggle.
Yeah, he's like, I feel like I'm just setting. This is a setup for the Avengers, basically.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a gamble that paid off for all involved. I mean, Kevin Feige like believing that he can create this connected universe, and hey, say what we want about it. It's mostly been successful, and that's a credit to Kevin Feige having that vision and believing in, and also Kevin Feige's a comic book fan. I think that helps with him trying to like piece all this stuff together. But then also, giving this first movie, giving Jon Favreau the space to direct proper origin tale for this character. Like I said, letting him go all in with Robert Downey Jr. And then surrounding him with like some decent supporting talent as well. You would never think like Gwyneth Paltrow would pop up in a movie like this back then. It was like it's just like, I'm sure she was like, oh, I got kids, probably fun to do. Let's do it. And this is also a time when I think roles like hers and these kind of movies, this is when like they were always the girlfriend, right? I mean, there was rarely. I think it changes once you get to Iron Man 2, even when you get like Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow, like female characters in these movies eventually get more to do than just be like the girlfriend or the love interest. Yes. But I do like, even going back to this time, like the way they have her set up here, though, she is a good sounding board for him. She's not just there as like the damsel in distress or just like the thankless role of being the girlfriend. Like she has a significant role in how he sees himself too. Because, despite all of his ways, I think she sees the best in him probably before he even sees like the best in himself. So I think that it's interesting to go back on that time, though, where these were the kind of roles that were given to women when they were in these movies. And, and then Jeff Bridges is just good in everything.
Absolutely. Such a commanding presence.
Yeah, I mean, I know they try to do a little misdirection of like, oh, who's the villain? But you got bald head Jeff Bridges, and you're like, yeah, I think he's the bad guy.
I was gonna say, weird seeing him with no hair, especially because he wins his Oscar the next year when he has a full head of hair again for Crazy Heart, and like that's Jeff Bridges. I know it was. I can't think of any other performance of his where he's quite rocking the bald head, but it was very as soon as it appears on the screen. It is. And honestly, like I knew he was in the movie, but like even seeing him, like I kind of had to do a double take. I was like, it just looks so much different than Jeff Bridges, but it's all in his voice too. He's such a great acting talent. It was great to see. I don't know who else would have played that villain better. I don't think it's by no means top tier MCU villain, but for what was in that movie, Jeff Bridges does a great job portraying.
Right, and I think he has the advantage of being first, so I think that helps a bit.
Yes.
When you go back and look at, like, because sometimes one of the complaints about the MCU movies is that sometimes they drop the ball on the villain part and the motivations of said villain.
Yeah.
But I think what helps this character too is it feels very real. It doesn't really feel like, a superhero kind of villain that you would see in movies like this, which kind of like makes some of his scenes pretty chilling. Like he has a scene with Gwyneth Paltrow when she's trying to copy the stuff onto the flash drive.
Yes.
That is just so tense because he's so good. I mean, she's actually good in the scene too. Like you feel her like uncomfortable. Like she's like definitely knows that I was stooping, or he feels it.
Yes, and he's like, such an imposing man. He's pretty massive dude, so that adds to his portrayal too.
Yeah, but just like your overall like initial thoughts in the movie on rewatch. What was it like, kind of getting back into it, and do you feel like it's one of the better comic book movies?
You know what, like honestly, like my takeaway, like I'd say better, like one of the better comic book origin stories. I guess I haven't really like taken the time to really assess where I think it fits into the broader scope of comic book movies overall. I guess I didn't come out of it thinking that way, but I'm also a little bit disadvantaged in the sense that I've seen so many comic book movies since I'd last seen this one. I think maybe if I had been a little bit more familiar with it at the time it came out and I could accurately put it in its place during then, I might think differently. But I'll probably sit on it, I guess, before I really come to terms with where I think it fits in terms of like overall comic book movies. Definitely among the better in the MCU. Like this was again, like it was so nice to be back in this early period for Marvel movies where there's just it did some things that just would never go to these days. Like some of the humor, you get a little bit more of a dirtier, less kid friendly sort of humor and some dialogue.
That was the vibe I picked up right away.
Yeah. So, which was just nice because it's PG-13. Which is great. A lot of them aren't these days. I mean, I don't have a great sense of what the ratings are for the Marvel movies these days, but I feel like majority of them are PG. So that's what I would guess.
PG-13. Like,
so great note to start off on, rating it that way. That being said, there's violence in the movie, but it's definitely kid friendly in that sense. You don't really see any gore or blood, anything like that.
Right.
I could have done with a little bit more violence or a little bit more like seeing some of the violence. It didn't necessarily take me out of it, but
I'm picking up that you like that.
Yeah, I do. It is something that
you're like, show me some shit.
Exactly. I'm all about the realism. I mean, you got dudes getting absolutely stomped by these massive metal machines. Like I'd like to see a little bit, feel the pain of some of these.
What that would really look like.
Exactly. But I get what they're going for. Like they definitely want to appeal to the widest audience possible. That's totally fine. But definitely seen PG-13 movies stretch the violence a little bit more. But there was a lot to love about it, especially after the last phase that we got. It was I'll say it time and time again. It's just like an era of the MCU that we have not seen since like that first phase, and it was good to be back. Robert Downey Jr. It's so crazy to me, like watching it, like how consistent he is in his character throughout all the appearances that he's had in the MCU. I'm like, this is the Tony Stark for the most part,
from start to finish.
He's the same guy. He kills that role. And he does a fantastic
like
job.
The back of his hand, dude. Yeah.
It's like he's been preparing for it for his whole life. It's like that point that you said earlier. It's like, where does Tony end and Robert begin, or vice versa? Hard to find that line is very much blurred. I feel like he's very much portraying a caricature of himself. And to the credit of whoever cast him, probably a little bit of a merger between John and Kevin. Absolutely phenomenal casting choice by those gentlemen, or whoever it really came down to, because like, again, after all these years, it'll be one of those roles that I don't know if you'll ever see recast. It's hard to imagine anybody else filling those shoes that he's left behind, and a great legacy for this second half of Robert's career, because he's very much synonymous with the character, and he definitely delivered a badass origin story for at the time was a relatively obscure, lesser known figure outside of the comics. So yeah, again, there's lots of love too that I'm sure we'll touch on later in the episode, but those are my initial thoughts, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way as you. Even, I've seen the movie a handful of times, and then rewatching it again. I was taken by, like, there is humor in it, but like you said, it's a little bit more, it feels more adult than what we kind of come used to in the MCU. it also has like a little bit more of a serious edge to it than like the other like MCU entries, like what we get later. Like this, it felt very adult, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like, and I kind of miss that a little bit because like clearly this shows that you can find the right balance of like having a bit of humor, but then also having like a little bit more of a serious tone. And I think that Jon Favreau and his writers came up with the right kind of way to set all this up, really. And and it was refreshing. Like it was like really did take me back to like that time of like, all right, yeah, this is how you really do a comic book origin story for film, and especially when it's a character that everyone doesn't necessarily know about. I thought they did a good job of like setting up with those initial like beginning scenes of like who he is as a person, and
Yep.
not the greatest guy.
Nope.
Bit of a
Charismatic.
charismatic for sure.
Undeniably, though.
Bit of a playboy. It seems like kind of resting on the laurels of like a company that was started by his father, and just kind of like doesn't even know what his company is really doing. Basically, he's like kind of like the money guy, and it's his in name only. Like, hey, you guys, I will do this, and you guys do that.
Right.
I won't get invested in the ins and outs of what's really going on. I thought those initial scenes are really good because we need to see that gradual change in him. And it feels like you almost feel like you're getting different movies in one. Like you have that whole like opening that kind of sets up the attack on him and everything, and then kind of
first act, I guess.
First act, and then going back to like kind of how he was as a person, and then where he ends up after being held in captivity and stuff, and like the things that he learns, and then the whole getting back home, and then kind of perfecting and like playing the seeds on like how to create the actual like Iron Man suit, and like seeing that kind of formation kind of happen is also its own little interesting movie in itself too. And then of course you have like how things kind of wrap up, where you like if in case you didn't guess that Jeff Bridges is the bad guy with the bald head.
Yeah. I was just saying, all the while we have during these three acts, after the first one, we think that we really know who the bad guy is going to be in this movie, but all the while we are getting a bad guy developed behind the scenes, kind of unbeknownst to Tony, because this is somebody that is supposed to be one of his oldest friends and a confidant of his father and him. And it's, although I think it's rushed in places, I think this kind of ties back into the footage you say that was cut to kind of give Robert more of like the
more screen time.
Yeah, exactly. The screen time. But all in all, it's a great little subversion to really incorporate somebody else as a villain in there that led to believe is on his side. So I liked that aspect of it as well, because I don't know if that movie would have stood alone if they had have left the terror organization that's like the bad guys in the beginning. If that's all they had really incorporated as the villain, I don't know that movie would have been as successful. It's nice to have someone to root for, to root against rather, that has such a close connection to our hero. That was definitely a good decision. Villain wise.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to add something into and talking about, as you asked earlier, about knowing if this was going to be connected to a greater universe. So this was definitely during a time where I wasn't aware to stay for post-credit scenes. I was like, as soon as like the credits start, me and my friends were like, Audi 5000, because like I don't want to sit through the credits. So I didn't find out until later that this movie had, way later actually, that it had a post-credit scene with Nick Fury and the whole Avengers initiative. So yeah, I didn't know that until later.
Dude, you know what is absolutely hilarious? I gotta cut in for 1 sec. I just watched it. I didn't even stick around. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even stay for the post-credit scene, so I didn't even watch it, which is so like, you would have thought I'd know by now, but
I know, right?
But watch that.
But it was also the first one, so you're probably like, they probably didn't have one. Like,
my mind.
But yeah, that post-credit scene, Nick Fury visits Tony Stark at home and tells him that Iron Man is not the only superhero in the world. That would have been cool to see in the theater, but I didn't know I had to stick around for that. And he explains that he wants to discuss the Avenger Initiative. And none of my friends brought this up at the time 15 years ago, so I don't think they stayed. Maybe the people that saw it at the time. Yeah, would have known. So like, I definitely didn't. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. It's funny that you were like, I didn't even like. When I was watching it,
I'm so wrapped up in the one from Incredible Hulk, because that to me seems like the meeting of Nick Fury and the establishment that there's going to be a partnership down the line. That's kind of where my brain was at. I just kind of subconsciously just didn't occur to me that there would be one in Iron Man, and I definitely wouldn't have remembered it from the first time I saw it. I doubt I even have ever seen it before. So that is funny for if you're looking to watch Iron Man, remember to stick around for the post credit scene. I wonder what the earliest example of that trope would have been. I'm sure it wasn't Iron Man, but definitely the one that popularized it.
Yeah, probably. That'd be interesting to look into, because I really don't know when like the post credit scene became like a. I kind of wish it wouldn't be, like the fact that like I have to stay all the way to the end sometimes. I mean, granted, Scream 6 did a really good job poking fun at that notion.
It made it worth the wait. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that the MCU definitely popularized it for sure, making it a thing to kind of like, ooh, let's see what we're setting up for, what's coming next. But yeah, so yeah. I love that 3 acts of the movie. Like, really feel like you're getting like a different type of movie in each one, and they all really work. I mean, my favorite portion of the film is just him kind of creating the suit and like trying to all the testing scenes where when he's testing the one time and he just like gets flung into the wall.
I laughed out loud. I was not expecting that.
And I remember like when I saw it in theaters, like that got a huge laugh from the crowd as well.
I can imagine.
And I even yesterday I was like dying laughing at it again because it was just hilarious. I mean, I love seeing like, oh yeah, he's gonna become a badass superhero, but I love that they show that there is like a work in progress.
Yeah,
well.
Trials and tribulations, and it doesn't all just come to him like naturally off the bat, which you see a lot in superhero movies these days. It's nice to see him struggle and fail. And also, like, perhaps like the thing I appreciated most about this watch is the humor that, honestly, there's not a whole lot of humor in it. I mean, there is in the sense of like Tony Stark's like delivery and his lines are just naturally, even though they're not like intentionally humorous, like there's something about his charisma that he says things that are kind of funny. Nothing in it is like forced. Like, for instance, that scene where he's testing out like the propulsion on his glove and he throws him, he like cartwheels into the wall. It's not like telling you have to laugh at the scene. It's just something that's going to invoke a naturally funny response. And something that the MCU in particular is very bad for is hammering the audience with jokes and forced laughter. So this one, to see that absent in this movie, I was like, just such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, most of the humor is courtesy of Robert Downey Jr. and his amazing line delivery.
Yes.
Jon Favreau gave almost every performer in the movie kind of like carte blanche to like try things and improv and stuff like that. So like you can, I'm sure you can write great stuff for Robert Downey Jr., but it seems like a lot of that stuff is just Robert Downey Jr. just doing what he does best. I mean, like, and he could put a button on the line really well, and you see that a lot in this movie, and I think you can also see it in certain scenes with like other people too. Like, I think, he brings the best out of Gwyneth Paltrow, I think, in their scenes together. Like you could tell, like maybe they're not all scripted and they're just kind of like, just riffing, like as actors, you're just kind of seeing what works. I also was dying laughing when he was having her like he was like trying to get her to take the thing out of his chest. And she's like, that scene was like, I was dying, and she's like, "Oh, it's pus." He's like, "No, it's not pus." And like, and he's like, "Now I want you to pull this out, but don't pull the magnet out." And she pulled it out. He's like,
yeah.
And she
felt like genuine, not even like acting, like just them having fun and like not abiding to the script.
And then when she was like, "What's happening?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just going into cardiac arrest." She's like,
"No big deal."
No big deal. Yeah. That's what I mean by like they have really great chemistry. I think that's just them just having a good time, like
absolutely
going back and forth, like, and it's interesting too because when I watch, thinking about it now, and considering what we know happens with Tony at the end of Endgame, I don't know if I like when I first saw this movie how invested I was in that relationship. I thought it was fun and it was like it's flirty, but they don't go like full throttle into romance really. I think that's probably for the best because it easily could have been like a typical girlfriend role for her to play. But in hindsight, it makes like seeing the humble beginnings of their relationship and then where it kind of, unfortunately, ends with his sacrifice in Endgame. You kind of forget, like, that relationship did it was really mattered. And it was like, I think developed really well across, 3 movies and then kind of random appearances that she kind of made. Like she's in Spider-Man Homecoming, like for a little bit and stuff like that.
She's like in a whole lot outside the Iron Man movies, though, is she?
No, so it's like she's in the first 3 movies, and then I think she's in Homecoming, and then of course she is in Endgame. I want to. does she have like a little part in like Civil War? Like I feel like she kind of does. I can't remember if she does or not. She might. But they definitely I think utilize her enough that you bought into like their connection as
Yeah.
as a
Oh
couple.
yeah.
And it's kind of like it was actually I thought one of the things I wrote down like it feels like it's a genuinely sweet kind of little thing that they have in this first movie. Like they're really fun to watch together, and I think that she kind of probably elevates what could be like considered a thankless role and makes it like a bit more than maybe what even was on paper,
I agree.
like within in the script.
Honestly, I think works to that movie's benefit a whole lot is that there isn't such an in your face like forced romantic aspect. Like yeah, like you said, they are very much flirting throughout the movie. It's like you almost kind of like discovering that he actually cares for her more than he realizes. So like it's not like they'd start off the whole like dynamic between their romance doesn't really play too much of like a part on the story, which again a lot of other superhero movies do. But like for instance, like, the opening, like he's sleeps with a journalist and she's sees her out in the beginning, like near the opening frame. She actually has a really snarky line to her where the journalist can't remember the character's name, but she's asking if she usually is picking up Tony's dry cleaning, and she goes, yes, I do everything that Tony pretty much asks, including sometimes taking out the trash. I thought that line.
Oh yeah. She delivered that line really well too. Yeah.
She did.
Oh yes, and Leslie Bibb, actually, who plays Christine Everhart, the reporter for Vanity Fair. Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, I actually wrote that down too to mention that. I'm glad you mentioned it. That was a really good line, really good line read from her for sure.
Yeah, I like they don't start off as like a couple and like that whole dynamic between him developing his like persona as Iron Man is
it's
like throws a wrench in between. Yeah, exactly. It's nice. The rate at which like their romance develops, I think, is like perfect for this movie.
Yeah, and they also have a scene later where she basically, he's like, I have to do this. I have to do like I'm finally doing something right, and she doesn't really want him to go through with it because she thinks he's gonna like really hurt himself again. Yes. And she doesn't want to see it, so she quits. And then he basically you've worked with me this long when I wasn't really doing all the right things, and now that I'm finally
gonna do something right from the damage and the death. Yeah.
And what I loved about that scene, I feel like in any other movie she would have had a scene where she just walks out and that's it. It felt very real to their relationship that she would hear him say what this means, and she's like, okay, I get it, and I will stick with you. And it's like really a small kind of moment, but I thought that I liked how they handled that between them, where it wasn't going to be like, like I can't do this and like, storm off the kind of thing.
Exactly. She's very level-headed, even, to the point where she's persevering through something she doesn't really support, but because she understands his perspective.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that was actually a well done moment too. And
100%.
Yeah, it's actually nice, not having the film be like, yeah, it's cool to have like the romance and stuff like this, but like, at the heart of it, we really want to focus on his development as a superhero, exactly. his origin story. And even though she ends up in danger towards the end of the movie, I still didn't think she was a damsel in distress, though. Like, I really didn't really feel that at all. Like you said, she's also very level-headed. She was, she's smart. She's tough in her own right. So, like, it was also, even though she is playing that girlfriend role, the way they wrote it and the way she plays it kind of makes it a bit better in that regard, too, I think.
Totally.
And, it's actually, Jon Favreau said that he wanted their character's relationship to be reminiscent of a 1940s comedy, and that is one of the main reasons she took the role, because she thought it'd be a fun and a very like innocent but sexy way. Like she loved that they didn't really play up the romance, like we were saying, and that it was more like a flirtation rather than like a full blown like we're in a relationship.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that they came down to Jon Favreau, but I really like that approach.
And you can actually, it's funny what he says. It's reminiscent of a 1940s comedy. I actually got that vibe when he goes to that event that he clearly wasn't invited to, and he sees her in the dress and they start dancing and like they're talking, and it feels very like kind of like when they're delivering lines almost like a kind of like 1940s comedy between two lovers, and then like she realizes like, wait, I can't be dancing and talk to you like this, like you're my boss and we're in front of everyone. And they have that whole dialogue exchange like outside where he basically is like telling her like, okay, you're blowing this out of proportion, like stop freaking out. Right. It really that does feel like a little bit of maybe Jon Favreau was looking for in terms of like how they should interact. So I kind of picked up what he was putting down in terms of that, at least.
Completely agree.
And in regards to Terrence Howard
Mm,
as James Rudy Rhodes,
yes.
everyone knows that this character looks quite different in Iron Man 2 and everything after that moving forward.
Because there's a
Because
new man in the role.
Terrence Howard was replaced by Don Cheadle, who I know this is like an Iron Man 2 thing, but one of my favorite stories is like Don Cheadle said he had like 15 minutes to decide whether or not he wanted to take on this role, and then like
Oh,
what that would entail, like, you know, signing up for multiple movies. I think he
right.
was at his kid's birthday or something, and they were like, and he was like, well, you know, I'm at a kid's birthday thing, can I have time to think about it? They're like, all right, we'll give you 15 minutes basically.
Oh my
And
God.
so then he was like, I mean, I guess he was like, in the reward will probably be much greater than like, you know, maybe I should take more time to think about this. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., like, you know, that first movie was a big hit. It made you know, critics liked it. Maybe I should just take a chance on it. And of course, you know, I think a lot of actors, whether, you know, Don Cheadle has done really small movies, really big movies, and you know, you kind of maybe want to be a part of like a big tentpole, you know,
Right.
blockbuster.
Good
So yeah,
opportunity.
but he was given that opportunity. Terrence Howard, when renegotiating his contract for potential Iron Man 2, saw that Robert Downey Jr. was getting a big pay bump. I think Robert Downey Jr., they said, made $500,000 to do this movie.
Oh, wow.
That's because he wasn't the man he is post
Right.
Iron Man.
Yeah.
Terrence Howard obviously was paid more than him because Terrence Howard is coming off of, you know, Oscar nominations for Crash and Hustle and Flow, and like
Damn.
this is like a big, he's like, you know, thing at this
Yeah.
point,
He's
right?
an American Gangster too. He's got a good
Yeah.
name on that as well. Yeah.
So he didn't like the deal they offered him, and they were like, well, you can easily
Too
be replaced, I guess.
bad.
And
Yeah.
they replaced it with Don Cheadle. You know, and there's a lot of, you know, Terrence Howard has his way of, you know, he kind of blames Robert Downey Jr. for not going to bat for him, and like, because, you know, there's a lot, I mean, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, and like
Right.
how much control Robert Downey Jr. actually had. I It was funny because he's a big fan of Robert Downey Jr. before they did the first one, and
Right.
definitely not now.
Interesting that
But
it led to some bad blood. But from what I understand, how I always heard the story was that Terrence was actually like quite difficult about it and like not like I think a little bit
I
too big for his britches.
I heard that too,
Is
yes.
that yeah?
And I've
Should
actually
I?
heard that
Yeah,
about other
honestly.
projects he's been a part of too.
Okay.
But you know, looking at him in this, and then of course what we know that Don Cheadle does with the character, it's not like the character is like huge, right? I mean, it's not like bigger MCU roles, but like still
Right.
significant. What was your take on his interpretation or character? And was it even too early for you to be like, oh, I wonder how he would? You picture him like in Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, like all the other subsequent MCU appearances that, you know, War Machine eventually makes in these movies? Can you see Terrence Howard doing it, or is it so
I
much
would have
like
liked the opportunity to have seen him go through that role because I really liked him in this. It was so far removed from his performance in this movie from the first time I saw it that I didn't really know what to expect from him. But
right?
Terrence Howard has always been an actor I've really respected and enjoyed his performances from. So I have no doubt he would have killed the role. He seemed to have like a passion doing it. And he has that one line too, right? And that teases that his character
Oh,
going on to become War
from the
Machine.
War
And he's like,
Machine,
next
yeah,
time, baby, when he's looking at
yeah.
the suit.
I got a cheer from the audience when we saw it in theater.
Oh, no doubt, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Would have been awesome. But I think Don Cheadle, filled that role awesomely. He's an actor. I'm definitely less familiar with his work. I have seen him in Hotel Rwanda. Off the top of my head, that's the only other thing I can think of that I've seen his performance
Oh,
in.
Ocean's 11, man, you gotta watch that.
Oh shit, yes. I actually just rewatched. I never got the chance to tell you, but when we were skipping what we covered, I forgot that I had seen him in that. And is he naturally British or does he put on an accent?
No, that's accent, yeah.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, I think that kind of led into why I'd forgotten because he's speaking with I'm assuming a British accent or something close to it.
Right.
But yes, but no, I think as far as recasting that role, they did a damn good job, Don Cheadle. And then since then, he's definitely who I more associate as War Machine than Terrence. But I think that if things had have went a little bit differently, I definitely think that that role would have been good for Terrence to fill out throughout the rest of the MCU. However, I don't know if we would have got him in Prisoners if he's still doing Iron Man movies down the road. So I'm not that salty about it. I love him in that movie. And
Yeah.
as the case with like many of like A-listers that do get wrapped up into the MCU, that they don't have the opportunity that they'd like go on and do other projects, especially ones that are like time consuming or demanding of them. So I think that probably was for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he feels that way just watching all these movies, all the money that comes in from them.
Maybe not so much.
Like I actually, when I was rewatching it yesterday, I think that he has, in the same regard as Robert Downey Jr., there's some stuff they played well off of each other too. I thought they had pretty good like friend chemistry. I bought them as buddies.
Yeah.
And I thought that Terrence Howard was actually good in it. I mean, I think just because, of course, Don Cheadle had more opportunities to play the part, of course, I think I'm more linked to him in the role. But yeah, it just like depends on, I guess your preference. I mean, it kind of sucks that it ended the way that it, I guess, did. I mean, it sounds like, as he was paid $3.5 million for the first movie compared to Downey's $500,000 salary.
Jeez, that's quite
and then Downey's salary was increased dramatically for Iron Man 2 to a rumored $10 million plus a cut of back-end profits. That in turn led Marvel's studios to drastically slash Howard's pay to what the actor said was just $40,000 per film. That didn't sit well with Howard, who claimed to have helped Downey land the role. That's another bone of contention. I don't know if that is what Terrence Howard has said. He said he went as far to take a $1 million pay reduction for Iron Man if the studio would hire Downey. However, Marvel insists Howard played no part in Downey's casting. Additionally, Howard told NPR in 2008 that good faith negotiations weren't always held up at Marvel. Boom.
Well, yeah, I can kind of see that. I think a studio of their caliber and size is probably going to combat, rumors and stuff like that, and definitely make themselves maybe out to be a little bit more virtuous than they really are. Again, this is just speculation on my behalf, but I can definitely see something that going down. Interesting. I wonder if there's maybe some different insight somewhere in the industry that would be able to shed some light on that. Because if that's the case, like, I don't blame, taking that at face value, if that's actually what happened, I don't blame Terrence Howard at all for being upset and wanting to exit projects for that. The fact that he's taking a cut, he's still a pretty big character in that first movie and does a lot of lifting in terms of the story and his partnership with Iron Man.
Yeah.
So
don't
blame at all for being upset trying to negotiate his contract. That is quite the decrease in the contrast between their
very much so. I mean,
scales.
He commented on this again in 2013 during an appearance on Bravo's Watch What Happens Live. And he placed a lot of the blame again on Downey. He said, it turns out that the person that I helped become Iron Man, when it was time to re-up for the second one, took the money that was supposed to go to me and pushed me out. We did a 3-picture deal, he continued. You did that deal ahead of time. A certain amount for the first one. For the second, a certain amount. For the third, they came to me for the second one and said, we will pay you 1/8 of what we contractually had for you because we think the second one will be successful with or without you. And I called my friend that I helped get the first job, and he didn't call me back for 3 months. And he elaborated in 2015 saying he called him multiple times but never heard from him again. And guess who got the millions I was supposed to get? He got the whole franchise. So I've actually given him $100 million, which ends up being a $100 million loss for me from me trying to look after somebody. But to this day, I would do the same thing. It's just my nature. I don't know.
I know, it's like one of those situations where you don't really know who to believe, especially where they're both not meeting the same story on either end. It's kind of, I mean, I have no reason to think why Terrence Howard would lie about that sort of thing, but then again, I don't know how big his ego really is, and it's hard to really take everything a studio is saying as the truth. You know what I mean?
That's
where they
true.
have different incentives and a reputation to uphold. I don't want to believe that because that's kind of shady on Robert's behalf, but again, I don't want to get too much into it because we'll just never really know. But shame. It's too bad because I really liked Rhodey.
Yeah, they had a good rapport in the movie too. I thought they worked well together. They worked well together. So interesting enough, other than Robert Downey Jr., before the screenplay was prepared, Favreau actually approached Sam Rockwell to play the part of Tony Stark. It's funny because Sam Rockwell eventually will appear in Iron Man 2 in a role, so that worked out too. Rockwell was interested, but Favreau changed his decision after he saw a screen test from Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, yes, Rockwell played Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2, by the way. And then Favreau ultimately chose Downey, who was a fan of the comic. But yeah, you could tell that because he felt the actor's past made him an appropriate choice for the part, and explained the best and worst moments of Robert's life have been in the public eye. He had to find an inner balance to overcome obstacles that went far beyond his career. That's Tony Stark. So that makes a lot of sense, I think.
Seems like
And
one of those gifted, meant like born for sort of roles.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, you could tell like he feel. I mean, that role is very much in his DNA. Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, and like you said, it's not something that changes across like multiple appearances. Like you can just trust him to be him. Like
Absolutely. The same thing.
100% Tony Stark.
Same thing can be said for Captain America, which I think just enhances the relationship between those two characters as the MCU goes on. They're very much both steadfast in their character development. They're always, for the most part, I mean, as you mentioned, like obviously Tony experiences some growth, but for the most part, his nature, his character, his wittiness is all consistent among the movies. And I love to see how he interacts with other members of his team, so to speak, as the movies go on. He is very, very consistent, and something that going back and having seen much more of his more recent performances as Iron Man, going back to seeing the first one, which was so many years before, like the last time I would have seen him in that role, it was uncanny to see how much he hadn't changed, but in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too because like, I mean, I've told you I've watched that like Icons on Earth docu-series on Vice, and they were just covering Marvel. They just did their season finale. They ended on Ant-Man, actually. When they were talking about Iron Man and the role of Phil Coulson, who's played by Clark Gregg, that was supposed to be, so the first thing that he has with Gwyneth Paltrow, that was supposed to be kind of it. Like that was he was going to bring up like the whole like very long elaborate name for what we know as Shield, and that was going to be their interaction. But then Jon Favreau liked what Clark Gregg was doing with the role, and like would throw him in other scenes, like just like, all right, wait, well, no, we're gonna got something else for you, like you can do this one, and like sprinkled him out throughout the entire movie. And Clark Gregg was like, it's funny because like I signed up for it was like something much smaller, and like been nice to see how it progressed,
Right.
Over time, because even by the time we get to the Avengers, he dies, of course, and then he was like, I thought that'd be it. He said he had a really rough day on set, and then then Agents of Shield happened, and that show was on for like 7 seasons, I think. So he was like very grateful that he got to, it started here with like what was just kind of be like a one offshoot kind of thing, like one maybe scene, and then he was like, no, we like what he's doing, and let's put him in more. And that, I mean, Clark Gregg is really great in that role. I mean, it's a really that's another role that seems like actor was born to play. He really embodies that role really well.
Definitely.
And yeah, and it's just really cool to kind of see like the beginnings of it. I do love that he's trying to set up this meeting with them to talk about Shield, basically, and they keep blowing him off. And I love after Gwyneth Paltrow leaves, after copying that stuff onto the flash drive, and she knows that by this point that he probably knows that Jeff Bridges knows that she did something, and she's running out, and he's like, yeah, what about that meeting? She's like, yeah, we can have that meeting right now. She's like, right now.
As soon as it's convenient, he's right there, and she laughs right on to him. Yeah, it was humorous. Big shot of Jeff Bridges is up, kind of like a level
looming,
in the background.
Oh yeah, I thought that was great. She's like, I can give you all the meeting you want right now. Yeah, I thought that was really good. And it's just like I said, like of course we know that this starts the MCU, but like to see a character like him that's like starts so small in this movie and then becomes a much bigger presence like later. I mean, he's a reliable presence in all the initial like setup movies, basically, almost.
Yeah,
just cool. And it was moments he said like during that interview that like he didn't know a lot of times like he was doing. They were like, hey, like I need you to come out to New Mexico to like shoot something, and he's like, well, what am I doing in New Mexico? And they realized then that they're like, oh, like we need you to kind of set up like what is going on with Thor, and he's like, oh, I'm in that. Like he didn't even know.
Like, yeah, I'm sure a lot of that was kind of figuring it out as you went along, both for writers and for studio execs. And then at the bottom of that, the actors finding out once these decisions are already made, it probably would have felt very much like on the fly as the universe was being created in those early days. And naturally, though, this is something that I feel like has led to like become a detriment for the MCU. Is it makes complete natural sense. Anybody would think to eventually start planning out in advance your movie so you can start preparing production a little bit earlier. But then then that has led to, I mean, you plan so far in the future, then things go wrong, like as we've been seeing with Jonathan Major's controversy. That can come back to bite you sometimes, and that's something that I think as the universe has expanded and gone on, it's kind of become somewhat of an unforeseen pain in the ass.
Yeah,
in
I agree.
ways.
Yeah, it's definitely, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's probably why I think Marvel recently stopped doing I mean, Samuel L. Jackson was signed to a ridiculous 10 pictures, some crazy amount of movies
Right.
to sign on for this, right? And I think I think you have to kind of look out for yourself when you're what as an actor, do I want to commit 10 films or something like that, whatever the crazy number is.
Right.
I think Brie Larson was one of the last that had a huge picture deal like that with Marvel, and they decided to change that because what they've learned with people that have worked with them, in the case of Elizabeth Olsen, I think she was only signed on for 2 appearances initially, and she didn't and Elizabeth Olsen didn't have a huge picture deal with them, but they loved writing for her and they loved the character, and she was always willing to come back. So there you get lucky like that. She really, and that's a good example of someone becoming a true fan favorite just based on the actress and the role, I think. And a lot of people love her in that part.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you were thinking about this going all the way back to 2008. I mean, it's a bit of a gamble if you're all right, I don't know if this is gonna for sure work.
Well, it's very much an experiment in that sense. This could have gone completely the opposite way, and this movie hadn't have done so well if it wasn't so positively received. The modern movie landscape would look a hell of a lot different than it does today.
Yep.
Which is, again, feeds into that experience and rewatching it after such a long time just to know what has come since this movie. To go back to the humble beginnings was, it's just something that you just don't get to experience in a lot of other properties. So at least not to the scale that this one is.
Yeah. And in the sense like I mentioned Coulson, you also have Paul Bettany providing the voice of Jarvis, and for it's in Avengers Age of Ultron, Jarvis is partially destroyed by Ultron, and Jarvis is given physical form as Vision, in which Paul Bettany gets to play in physical form, which is kind of cool. Kind of see the start of that. And funny too that voice of the spider suit in Homecoming is Jennifer Connelly, and she's married to Paul Bettany. So fun little.
Cool. That's neat. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that she even voiced the spider suit.
Yeah, so fun little connection between those two. And then also, even the director, you get to Jon Favreau is playing old Happy Hogan. This is the start of him as Stark's bodyguard and chauffeur and friend. A role that he, of course, played multiple times too across the MCU.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool. And he was like, yo, I'm not going to direct any more of these, but I'll still play with you guys.
I was actually surprised at how minimal his role is in this movie. I would have thought maybe by sitting in the director's chair, he would have given himself a few more scenes or some lines of dialogue, but he's not very present in the movie. You see him a lot in maybe some background shots, or he's kind of hanging out kind of a little bit behind, but doesn't have a whole lot to do that I would have expected in this movie. He definitely he's another role that definitely expands later into the MCU.
Yeah, and they use it. I mean, I think he's the most effectively used in the Spider-Man movies. I love his kind of fun, flirtatious thing with Aunt May, who's played by Marissa Tomei in those movies, and just really good. And he actually has a lot to I forgot. I recently watched Spider-Man Far From Home, and he's actually in it a decent amount.
Yeah, no, he's
yeah, which is kind of cool. And speaking of Spider-Man Homecoming, did you see that thing I put up where it said Robert Downey Jr. was paid $10 million for 8 minutes of screen time?
Yes, I did.
Spider-Man Homecoming, and then that person below it was and that's when they realized they had to kill him.
Yes, I did see that, and that's so true, because that would be a substantial part of that budget. At some point you're getting into
8 minutes.
Yeah, that is.
And that's that's all because that's part of that whole multi-picture deal we were talking about, where he has an option. He has we need to put him in one more or something to fulfill his contract or whatever. And then it's all right, it's
pretty easy work. Probably one day on set, maybe two.
Being a mentor to young Spider-Man, and the casting of Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. I remember some people at the time, of course, finding out later that there was an in-credit scene and stuff. They were like, well, Nick Fury in the comic books is white, but Jackson's face was actually previously used as the model for the Ultimate Marvel imprint version of Nick Fury, who is black in that. And so that is that guy used him as a model. They actually mentioned it on the Icons Unearthed thing too. They used him as model, and then the guy who wrote the Ultimate Marvel version of Nick Fury said that Samuel L. Jackson thanked him with a very signature F-bomb expletive.
Right.
You gave me some work, motherfucker, that kind of thing. So he's very grateful.
I would love for him to be able to drop one of those in the MCU. It's like that one that he gets. I mean, he definitely riff on that being his like personal tagline in Captain Marvel, but I fall so flat for me. It's like almost like a pale imitation, but just to have one would just be such a cherry on top. But oh well.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not like he hasn't said it enough.
No, I mean we have many examples of Samuel L. Jackson dropping the F-bomb.
Somewhere out there is a humongous compilation video of all the times he said the F word in movies, and it is hilarious watch.
Oh, well, I need to check that out.
Definitely, yes. If I find it, I'll send it your way.
Thank you. And that's also interesting in development too. Like all the way back to 1990, when Universal Studios bought the rights to develop Iron Man for the big screen, and I've seen this a lot on social media. Tom Cruise expressed interest in starring and producing a film version in the late 90s.
Right.
And I could totally, as a look, I could see him as Tony Stark. I don't know. I mean, I guess like the role he played in Jerry Maguire is kind of like little, like he was kind of like self-centered in the beginning and kind of grows in a similar fashion. I don't know if I could see him totally nailing it the way that Robert Downey Jr. does.
No, I think he would like try and make himself more of like a stoic character and not really play up the asshole kind of nature of him. You know what I mean? I just can't see him like bringing in like the unlikable parts of Tony Stark. I can't see Tom Cruise like really excelling in, but then again, I don't know, man. He is a pretty eclectic actor as well. But I did hear rumblings of this like in the past of like somebody did like what if the Avengers were in the 90s and they tied in this whole notion of Tom Cruise once upon a time being attached or interested in playing Tony Stark. And what a weird universe that would have been.
Yeah. God, can you imagine like if he was a part of the MCU? Like I don't know if he would be down for that.
I don't think so either. That's what I was gonna say. It's very much not a thing that I don't think he would be on board for.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he is opposed to franchises. I just don't know if he would just want to be tied down to having to appear in like all these other projects associated with the MCU.
Totally.
Because I could see him being like, "Yo, I like doing Iron Man," but like, who's to say that this Captain America Civil War thing is gonna be good? I mean, it was, but I could see him thinking that, But yeah, it would have been interesting. Definitely interesting if he took it. And like at one point, a long time during the film's development, Quentin Tarantino was approached to write and direct the film.
What?
I cannot see. I mean, I would love a Quentin Tarantino version of Iron Man would be kind of. You would definitely Samuel L. Jackson use the F word.
Yeah,
in the post-credit scene.
I don't know. I don't think him and Marvel are destined to collaborate. I don't think that I don't think he has the commercial appeal that Marvel's looking for. I mean, he has commercial appeal, but just in a very different sense. I cannot ever picture that going down. I think that he'd be very restrained, but who knows what he'd be able to win over script-wise on them? Who knows? Maybe we got a lot bloodier movie.
Probably. You would have got what you wanted.
I probably would have been way more on board, but I'm glad that that freed him up to do Inglourious Basterds. So very happy.
And then in November 2005, Marvel Studios worked to start development from scratch on Iron Man and announced the film as their first independent feature because the character was their only major one not already depicted in live action. And they said we went after about 30 writers and they all passed on making it, saying they were uninterested in the project due to both the relative obscurity of the character and the fact that it was solely a Marvel production. The film did have a script. Even the request for rewrites met with many refusals. Early scripts for the film also directly referenced Sony Pictures' Spider-Man 2 by identifying Stark as the creator of Otto Octavius' bionic arms. And in order to build the general public awareness of Iron Man and elevate him to the same level of popularity as Spider-Man or Hulk, Marvel conducted focus groups trying to find a way to remove the general perception that the character is a robot. The information Marvel received from the focus groups was used to formulate an awareness building plan, which included releasing 3 animated short films ahead of the film's release. The shorts were called Iron Man Advertorials and were produced by Tim Miller and Blur Studio. That's crazy that like 30 writers are like, no, I don't. Who is he?
That is insane. Well, I was just looking up, and there's 4 writing credits for the screenplay for that movie, which is already a little bit swamped. But
I always get a little nervous when there's like multiple writers on projects like
definitely.
that.
I mean, there's definitely instances where that works out very well, but usually when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, you can have some conflicting ideas and not as cohesive a story. But props to the gentleman. It looks like they were all men. Yeah, props to everyone that did sign on to write because they did a quite good job.
Yep.
But honestly, I like that idea of the utilizing focus groups to sort of like kind of craft
or like a plan, like a kind of like
exactly and kind of test what like audiences like know or want to see or what their perception of Iron Man is before you take this massive gamble. I think that's a very smart move.
I agree.
But you were about to say something. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, it's okay. I was gonna ask you, were there any scenes or moments that stood out to you as like some of the best in the film that you really like kind of took something away from, like as like being like fun or just like really made it entertaining? Yeah.
I mean, aside from like the staple scenes, like there's the one that was just as badass as ever to watch when he shoots that one little like tracer missile into the tank and turns around and it explodes.
That was the moment from the trailer, that first trailer, and I was like, oh, this might be good.
That lives up, like that holds up to this day. It's a badass scene. Also, I thought the original like assault on the convoy in the very opening is really cool. Even some of the dialogue before all that goes down is like from the get-go. Like I remember DMing you saying like
oh yeah,
I was like 30 minutes in at this point, and I'm already enjoying this much more than any other MCU movie I'd seen in a while. But it was in that opening scene, like with some of the, like I was saying earlier, some of the stuff they wouldn't get away with now, like in terms of just some of like the things that he says. I thought there was a great opening, painting a clear picture of who Tony Stark is very early in the film, and then that assault on the convoy was quite well done, and like I mean,
pretty jarring too.
Jarring, and aside from like those mainstream sort of like action scenes that movie's known for, there's this awesome shot. I can't remember exactly contextually what was going on, but there's a shot. Oh, it's actually when Iron Man kind of like tricks Jeff Bridges into like following up into the upper atmosphere, and then his suit gets all iced up and plummets down. There's a shot of Iron Man with the moon in the background, and he's just up there in the darkness, and the moon's right behind him. I thought that was probably my favorite shot in the movie. Like that just looked pretty bad.
It was a really great shot.
That was an awesome shot.
This is a great looking movie too. I mean, also, I mean, clearly, it's a big budget film, but like, looks very good. And it's still like doesn't appear 15 years old. Like, of its look, I guess.
Effects in this movie, granted, I don't know how much green screen there is, but this movie looks much better effects wise than some of the movies they've released in the 2020 so far. I don't know what the excuse is for that, but like there isn't a. There I go again, just lost power again. But I don't know why a movie like. I think that this would be something that would just be improved upon over the years, but not necessarily. That's not always the case. But props to the effects team because none of that. I mean, there's a lot of pyrotechnics involved in this movie, which I guess isn't hard to make look real because it is. But yeah, effects wise and cinematography wise, this movie looks fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And I love, I also love a good callback. That whole scene where he takes Jeff Bridges up, he tricks him. He of course knew that would happen because that's something similar happened when he was testing out the suit and all that. I love that they call back to that. I just like when movies do that.
Definitely,
not just like a throw. Not just have a throwaway scene. They're like, oh yeah, he tried that. He knows that. He knows what's going to happen.
Set up and pay off for later.
Look at the movie being a movie.
Exactly.
But yeah, it does pay off really well. Like I said, I love the whole him creating the Iron Man, the suit, and like the trial and error. Like that whole segment of the film, I think is really its best.
I agree.
And like present, like it's different from like most like kind of comic book origin stories. So, like sometimes you don't really see like trial and error from when they become heroes. I mean, like Batman Begins does it, in a way, and I thought that was cool. I mean, there are some people like I think Batman Begins gets better with every viewing of it, but I do have a few friends that like are like, oh, like the training part's so long, and like, like I want Batman. Like, I mean, like it does take a bit to get there, but like
Batman,
are you gonna earn it?
Yeah.
Not to earn it, and they're probably so upset in The Dark Knight Rises where he's barely on screen as Batman, so they're probably more upset about that.
Probably.
But yeah, I like showing that like he's human, he has faults. He is trying to perfect this thing, but it's not going to be easy, and like it's going to take work. And I like that they showcase that, and I also like that it humanizes him in a way too. Like he's intelligent, he's smart, but he also needs to figure this stuff out too.
It's not perfect by any means, and he has like very well would have been easy to sort of like write him as like this sort of like invincible character, given like how intelligent he really is, and that is portrayed very early on in the film. But he almost has so many other character flaws to work through that it, like you said, it does humanize him, which is great writing on his behalf because he could have been such an OP character, but they really do kind of tone him down in terms of like the other aspects of his character that he needs to work on, and they do a good job addressing most of it in the movie. I found.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think one of the best things that they do, because like you could potentially lose Robert Downey Jr. when he's in the suit, right? Like you didn't know how to like really utilize it. I
Right.
love how they do, go into like the suit and you still have him. You can still have
Yes.
like Robert Downey Jr. And like I think I believe I heard on Marvel's Icons on Earth thing that they really did that because they didn't want to lose any of his performance as much as they could while he was in the suit, and that was one of the ways they wanted to utilize. Like, hey, we got this really great actor. He delivering our dialogue like basically. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that. So that's something they've done across every appearance he's made in the MCU, and I thought that was like a good just visual choice and also a good way to not lose the lead actor being hidden within the suit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because sometimes with stuff like Spider-Man, you might lose that because you don't see the actor you've grown accustomed to playing, like see him physically speaking the line and seeing it could be like a stuntman, right?
Exactly. Honestly, on that note, I think a good way that they combat that in the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies is like have like his eyes and like the facial features of his mask kind of like react, expand and contract. Like I think a good way to kind of incorporate the physical performance in a way that you can't really get an inside shot of the Spider-Man mask, but it's cool. Like as you say, when the camera goes inside the helmet and you see the heads-up display on his face, it is a really cool perspective shot to see his face, because he does spend quite an amount of time under the suit and the mask. But again, great call by being able to go inside the suit and actually seeing Robert's face. That paid off really well. And he's got a great mug.
Yeah, that's one thing we can say about Robert Downey Jr. is that he has a great mug.
Yeah.
And definitely just born to play that part, like we said.
Yeah.
On more than one occasion. Did you feel? I actually, you know what? I didn't realize the movie was like 2 hours, like over 2 hours, like a little over 2 hours. Didn't feel long though. Like, did you on rewatch? Did it feel long to you, or did
No, it didn't feel long. I'd say like although on that point, I was ready for it to wrap up when it did. Like, I feel like they could have cut 10, 15 minutes maybe here or there. Yeah. That doesn't mean that I felt like it was long watching it, but I did feel that the first act, the entire act where he is kidnapped, basically held by the group, I thought that was as good as it was. I did think there was sequences
went on too long.
Like that one that was very rough. No, that was
rushed. Oh, okay.
Especially like the one thing that I think the film struggled is kind of like setting up or like giving the audience a feel of how much time has really been passing, because it kind of feels like he makes a suit in like 15 minutes. But obviously he says he's there for 3 months, but you don't really get the sense that he's for how long he's there for. There's even there's an ultimatum given by the leader of like the 10 Rings organization. He's like, you have until tomorrow to make this weapon, this missile that he's being held there to make. And then by the next day comes and he's putting the finishing touches on the suit. And it led to me to believe that it felt a little bit rushed, but granted, there's a lot of other aspects of the movie they got to get to beyond him just being stuck in the cave and creating that Mark I suit. But again, just kind of a smaller complaint. And there's other sequences too that I guess feel like they could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but for the one time that they have, I think they do a good job balancing the story.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, also I thought what was cool then, and I still think it's cool now, because so many superhero movies, it's all possibly they should have a secret identity and like should know, like the general public should know if this person is that superhero. But I'm glad that it was like, I remember at the time when he has a press conference and he admits to being Iron Man. Like I thought I was like, oh, that's refreshing. Like sometimes I guess it's cool. I mean, in some regards, like, oh yeah, this person has a secret identity and like these people don't know who he really is. But Tony Stark, personality wise, I think would lean into that and just like, yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, I think that was really refreshing. I thought, like, to have that be the case at the end, to him to.
I agree. I think it was a good note to end on. Yeah, exactly. And it seems very true to his character that he kind of, I feel like he does kind of want the attention on, and that's very true to his character.
Yeah.
He's a playboy. So it makes sense that he'd want to kind of get a little bit of the fame and attention from being Iron Man, even if he doesn't necessarily like admit it. I do think it was very like true to his character to embrace his identity at the very end. But then even then, that last shot, like that's the last thing he says is "I am Iron Man," and then the movie kind of wraps up right then and there. I thought even maybe 30 more seconds would have been enough to really like let it sink in, but
you're like,
again, it's longer. It just ends kind of abruptly. I do remember feeling that as soon as the watch was over. I was like, okay, well, that's it.
Well, that was it.
Yeah,
but I mean, also kind of a cool note to end on. I mean, like
definitely.
And then on Icons on Earth thing, they said that when they had him, they said that he changed like wording and like how that was originally written. Like it was like more wordy, I guess. And
Okay.
Robert Downey Jr. just kind of like did that, and they were like, "Oh, that works too." And one of the guys working on the film said that in that moment he felt like when they were doing that scene that Robert Downey Jr. like this is him becoming this part. Like he felt it on that date, like
Okay.
on set. Like, no, this is like his role. This is his stamp.
See,
Hard pressed to find anyone else who could probably play him better. And I thought that was kind of cool to like hear that from someone that worked on the film. Like that was the feeling they got after they wrapped that scene up. It was kind of cool. And then, like we said, Iron Man was released on May 2nd, 2008. In its opening weekend, it grossed $98.6 million.
Holy.
Ranking first at the box office, giving it the 11th biggest opening weekend at the time, 9th widest release in terms of theaters, and 3rd highest grossing opening weekend of 2008 behind Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and The Dark Knight.
Pretty impressive numbers.
On its very first day, it opened to 35.2 million on its first day release. And it was the number one film in the US and Canada for its second weekend as well, where it grossed $51.2 million in its second weekend, giving it the 12th best second weekend and the 5th best for a non-sequel at the time. And then on June 19th, 2008, Iron Man became that year's first film to pass the $300 million mark for the domestic box office. Ultimately grossed $319 million in the US and Canada and $585.8 million worldwide.
And
it,
how much was it made for?
Budget on Iron Man is, I just had it, sorry.
That's not good.
$140 million.
Okay, hefty, but pretty back. Awesome.
And only $500,000 of that went to Robert Downey Jr. That's crazy.
That is insane to think about. Wow.
That is crazy. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an approval rating of 94%.
Okay.
With 282 reviews counted. Consistency reads, powered by Robert Downey Jr.'s vibrant charm, Iron Man turbocharges the superhero genre with a intelligence and infectious sense of fun. Also scored an A cinema score on its opening night. And oddly enough, reviews were excellent, but Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars. And praised Downey Jr.'s performance and stating, at the end of the day, it's Robert Downey Jr. who powers the liftoff, separating this from most other superhero movies. And a lot of people, near universal praise for just Robert Downey Jr. Like he makes the film for a lot of reviewers. Sometimes I like to find a negative one. I did find one.
What do they have to say?
The New Yorker gave it a negative review, claiming it was a slightly depressed, going through the motions feel to the entire show. Gwyneth Paltrow, widening her eyes and palpitating, can't do much with antique role as Stark's girl Friday, who loves him but can't say so. Terrence Howard is playing a military man who chases around after Stark looks dispirited and taken for granted.
Interesting.
Yeah, I probably could find another bad review, but I mean, no. I think most people...
It seems that everyone pretty much landed on the positive side of that movie, especially at the time. I can see why, not having anything else to really compare it to or like view it in conjunction with all the other properties that it spawned. I'm not surprised to hear that it did as well as it did. 94 is high.
That is high.
I guess I can see it because now I'm thinking there's definitely been some better superhero movies that have come out since then that probably don't have 94s, but at the time, it was probably very deserving of a score that high.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess the score is reflective of the reviews at the time. So, it kind of makes sense. I don't necessarily disagree with any of those reviews or those numbers. I mean, honestly, impressed that it cleared half $500 million at the worldwide box office. That's
crazy.
Quite impressive. Yeah.
Good start for Marvel.
That's what I was thinking too as soon as you said that.
Probably like, we can't wait till June when you guys see the Incredible Hulk. Make as much money.
No, it's definitely
FYI.
started on the right foot regardless.
Yeah. Roger Ebert and Richard Corliss named Iron Man as among their favorite films of 2008. It was selected by the American Film Institute as one of the 10 best films of the year and by Empire Magazine as one of the 500 greatest movies of all time. Tony Stark was also selected by Empire as one of the 100 greatest movie characters of all time. And on their list of the 100 greatest fictional characters, they ranked Fandemania ranked him at number 37. The Library of Congress selected Iron Man to be added to the National Film Registry in 2022, deeming it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And in response to the selection, Kevin Feige stated its inclusion on the film registry meant the film has stood the test of time and that it is still meaningful to audiences all around the world.
Yeah, I would say most, if not all, movies that the what do you say was the National
Film Registry.
National Film Registry. Yeah, I'm sure most movies that are in there, earn their spot. And this many years later, not surprised to hear that it's been included in there. Honestly, pretty great accolade for that movie to have.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we know it was followed by 2 standalone sequels, Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. Iron Man 2 was directed by Jon Favreau, but he did not direct 3. That was Shane Black, who took over directing duties. Oddly enough, that movie came out on May 3rd, 2013, so that turns 10 in a couple of days. Probably not as relevant enough to do an episode for it.
Right.
It's on the list because I did see it, and I didn't know about the cultural impact of Iron Man.
Definitely not as significant. If anything, I think from what I understand, it kind of had there's definitely some issues with that movie that kind of has like a bad taste in some viewers' mouth. I know the whole thing about the Guy Pearce's villain is a little bit wonky. But I saw a shot the other day on some social media. For all I know, it could have been you that posted it. I'm not sure, but it was a shot of each villain in the movie, like the main villain in across the Iron Man movies, and the shot of Guy Pearce that had him, this character that emit sort of like energy from inside him or something. He was all like lit up. I was like, oh my goodness.
You're like, good God.
Yeah, but I'm due for a rewatch of the second one too, especially for Mickey Rourke. I love it.
who hated doing it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. No, he did not have a good time doing that movie,
I think what he signed up for was much different than what the actual execution was. I think everyone would agree that Iron Man 2, just because of what it had to set up, probably wasn't what they signed up for. Unless you're like Scarlett Johansson and Samuel L. Jackson, who were like, no, this is setting us up for something else.
Yeah, that's
like,
right. Yeah, no, they get
we're fine.
They get adequate development for sure.
Yeah, we are perfectly fine. But yeah, any closing parting thoughts on Iron Man 15 years later?
Just to parrot what I'd said in the beginning, it was a great watch. I'm coming off with a good feeling from that watch, especially as I said, it's no stranger to like my criticism of like later MCU movies. So it was refreshing to be back in the early days. Definitely a lot of lessons I think that could still be learned going forward for this franchise from like some of the earlier movies like Iron Man. Just a lot of things done right. I think there's still a lot of things in that movie that like audiences these days would want to see that they're not getting, and less of things that they are getting more of in some of their later MCU movies, like a lot of like the humor and whatnot, and maybe some of the more raunchier dialogue, maybe a higher rating, like the PG-13 rating. A lot of things that I think could be incorporated in movies going forward that it's nice to see. They started off on such a great foot with this movie, and it was good to go back and see it again for what very much felt like a first time watch. So I had a blast. Honestly, I'm glad that we covered it. Glad that we are talking about this movie so many years later. It's obviously still stood the test of time. Yeah, but what about your thoughts? I know I didn't get to throw a whole lot of questions to you this episode about what your thoughts on movies were, but what are your takeaways?
I love seeing kind of like, it's weird saying that a $140 million movie is like humble beginnings, but it does feel like humble beginnings of the MCU.
Right.
And, like you said earlier, it's a really, probably one of the better comic book origin, like film adaptations that we've had. Thanks. And I mean, a lot of people working together to make that work. It's good writing. It's good direction from Jon Favreau. It's like we've said the entire episode, of truly great lead performance from Robert Downey Jr. and then some fun supporting roles as well. Like I think everyone kind of was on board to it feels like everyone knew what the kind of movie they were making, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like I think having someone like Jon Favreau, who's a pretty good directing talent, and I think working with him, they probably all enjoyed working with him, and he probably created a pretty positive vibe on set as well.
I can imagine.
You can tell that everyone's having fun Like it feels like a really fun movie too.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that part of it. And what I kind of took away too from this rewatch is I know, like, seeing how Robert Downey Jr. starts here, and then of course we know what happens with the character at the end of Endgame, which makes perfect sense as far as like story wise. I mean, you had to be like big moment of sacrifice for that character, and gives that movie its big emotional like
Hmm.
weight, right? What I realized is I don't think the MCU has quite recovered from losing him. Like I don't feel like, I guess you could maybe say Tom Holland or some other people, but I don't think they have their Robert Downey Jr. anymore. And
You're
and
totally
that
right. They do not.
and that watching this and seeing where it started made me miss that. And I think that and man, you have like some talented people. It's still in the MCU. You got
Very much so.
you got Benedict Cumberbatch. You got Paul Rudd. You got, I mean, I'll even mention Tom Holland. There's a lot of people in this universe that are incredibly talented, but I don't think any of them have a character really that has that kind of impact the way that Robert Downey Jr. had as Tony Stark Iron Man. And
Completely agree. And
I
you
really
miss that
miss that.
presence. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was reminded of that just like watching it. It was just like, yeah, like
It's a great point.
I feel like they maybe want to do that with like Doctor Strange, like, but it's not really working for me. I mean, I like him. I like
Yeah,
the
no
character,
doubt.
and Benedict Cumberbatch is a good actor. It's just
You,
Robert
it's like
Downey
lightning in a
Jr. has
bottle.
something, man. Yeah,
Exactly.
there's no like, I feel like there's no like real leader anymore. Like, yeah, it might be a hot take for some people. Maybe
Yeah, I don't think you're alone. I completely agree with what you're saying, and his presence has definitely left a void that can it be filled? I don't know in the MCU. Definitely a presence that was very welcome while it was there in the MCU. I
Yeah,
get that he had to depart eventually. I think I totally see what you're saying, that they've not recovered since his loss, and I don't know who will be able to fill those shoes or if they'll get back on their feet quite like they did when he was involved, but we have yet to see. No,
yeah.
you're right. Going back to see his origins, it was nice to be back with the character.
Yeah, it was a fun revisit and like just a reminder of how important that role was to
Hmm.
the movies that followed he appeared in. And yeah, I mean, I know like Robert Downey Jr., I think he had a definite like Endgame was gonna be it, and like because I'm the other actor, he wants to be able to do other stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't imagine being someone like Chris Evans or him and being like, I mean, I understand if you're an actor, you want to do other things, but I feel like I'd be like, yo, I will ride this until you tell me I can't ride it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's how I would be, but like, kudos to them for being like, I think it's time for me to
You
step
don't want to
out and
overstay
like
your welcome, right?
go, right. I mean, of course, I'm sure they would love to still have them
No
be on
doubt.
board. Uh, yeah, that was my takeaway from it. And I think, like I said, it's crazy. Like, really, that summer of 2008, like, you have this and you have the Dark Knight, and like they are both, I think, kind of they are game changing comic book movies in their own right for different reasons. But
Definitely.
this, based on what it starts and what it will soon be the creation of, and then of course, just like the Dark Knight just being not just a good comic book movie, but like this, they were making like an adult drama thriller. Like there was like
Yeah.
that Matt disguised as a comic book movie,
Very
and
much so.
tricked us all in the best way possible. But yeah, it's like to have it kind of that year, like these two movies that define like comic book films, like it's crazy. Like, we
Insane to
got
think
some,
of how closely they came out. And I honestly feel like Iron Man is overshadowed by the Dark Knight. I mean, granted, I think that's fair, but interesting to see how much more popular this movie might have been if you're comparing them if it had been released just soon before or after. But
yeah,
I feel like it doesn't. I mean, it definitely made it's a good thing that it wasn't competing that necessarily at the
yeah,
box office
right.
of the Dark Knight. That would have been a whole other story. So good thing, because Fate might have had a different
You know what movie got
plan.
that sadly derailed because of the Dark Knight? I think
Hmm.
I think Hellboy 2 opened a week before
Oh
the Dark
no.
Knight, and it got Guillermo del Toro. He talks highly about the Dark Knight, but he knows that's. I mean,
That
it got
tanked his
killed.
film. Yeah.
It really did. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if the studio was like, "Oh, Dark Knight." I mean, who would schedule that the week before? I don't know, but yeah, time they it's like those first two Hellboy movies, even though they didn't make a ton of money, they're still fan favorites amongst the people that really
For sure.
like, and of course they love Guillermo del Toro's work. But everyone's like, man, maybe if we would have opened like a month before the Dark Knight. I was like, never know.
No, we will not.
Never,
It's too
never.
bad.
That is too bad. Yeah, man. Thank you for again sitting with me and talking another movie anniversary.
My pleasure, dude.
It was a fun
That
rewatch,
it was
and
a really fun rewatch, especially for me. Like some of that, like had been so far removed from these movies to go back. Honestly, it was a pleasant, not surprise. I was expecting to enjoy it, but it was just, yeah, it was a pleasant watch overall. So no, I'm glad that you had marked this one down for us to cover because watch and we're on a good streak of I've been really enjoying the anniversary episodes that we've covered, like let alone talking about them, but the watches in particular. I was quite
yeah,
surprised with X2 last time, and a good feeling going forward with this. And as I mentioned too off camera, like I've been thinking more and more about slowly getting through and starting from the ground up and going through the Infinity Saga. And I think this, I mean, no better time after seeing the first movie. I have only two other MCU movies on DVD of the many that I have, and those are The Incredible Hulk and the first Avengers. And I have Thor as well. So I will.
No, nice.
Maybe I'll use this as the catalyst, but no, but it was fun. So thank you again.
No problem. And you know what?
Yeah.
We have Incredible Hulk coming up in June, so maybe
Yeah, may as well.
Be when you can rewatch it. We might, I tease, I talk to you about like, right? It might be fun because like Hulk also has a 20th anniversary, and like kind of putting them together.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so we tackle both of those in one episode and how they tried twice to get that right and screwed up.
Let's lock it in. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, as always, my friend, sign us on off.
Yes, of course. Well, guys, if you're still listening, you've made it to the end of episode 94. So thanks a lot for joining us on Back to the Blockbuster. If you do not yet know, you can find us wherever you guys get your podcasts. That includes our good friends over at Good Pods, who are huge supporters of our show, and we appreciate all the work they do for us. So go have a listen to us over there or wherever you guys stream your podcasts. And of course, on any social medias at Back to the Blockbuster, you can find us where we have some other content for you guys to interact with. And stay tuned because we have a lot of stuff coming up to promote our episode 100, which is sooner than we think. It's really coming up. We're excited for that milestone. So you guys know where to find us. It's been a pleasure as always, Gaius, and I will tune in to you next week to discuss what's going on in the industry. Looking forward to it.
Yep. Looking forward to it, buddy.
Peace out, guys.
Peace.